Call the meeting of the Finance Committee of Wednesday, December 16th, 2015 to order. Absent or excused members tonight, I have received notice from Rich Lavoie and Bill Town that they would not be able to attend the meeting, so they are excused. Reserve fund transfers.
Madam Chairman, there is one reserve fund transfer. I had forwarded you a copy of the proposed contract about a week or so ago, I think.
I forwarded it to everyone.
We have a reserve fund transfer for $9,500 this evening request. The issue is to undertake a required inspection of two dams in the town, Red Brook Pond and Mill Pond dams. We had received a little background. We have to do this every 10 or years or so according to the Commonwealth regulations. And we went out to get quotes to do the dam inspections, and they came back hugely more expensive than we had anticipated they would be. So I had asked our town engineer, Mike Leitzel, to give the Commonwealth a call to find out what a normal inspection cost would be, ranges for, these aren't very big dams. And we did receive a range of dollars. And so we reached out to Green Seal, asked them to look at the scope of service and give us a price. That came in November, November 23rd, so it was post the ability for us to go to town meeting, the fall town meeting. We have to have the inspections done by the 28th of December, at least started, so we can report back to the dam folk, if you will, at the Commonwealth. Office of Dam Safety, excuse me.
Take care of these dam inspections.
So in order for us to do this, we are asking the Finance Committee to consider a $9,500 transfer to the engineering services / consultants line in Mike Leitzel's department. There's currently a balance of $100 in there because that's all we put in there every year. It used to be more, but we've cut it back. So if we need engineering services there, we generally have to come to you anyways. So that's what we have tonight. And
is there any questions from anyone about this?
That's the planning department?
No, it's the engineering
Engineering, okay.
I can't wait. I move we approve the dam inspection contract.
I second the dam inspection.
Kathy, could you hand those to the chair? And there are 4 copies there instead of 3.
Okay. Okay. Is there any further discussion on the dam inspection transfer of $9,500? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favor. Okay.
Appreciate the committee's consideration on that.
Thank you for giving us the information in advance. I think it makes it a lot easier to understand.
Is there something, that was the first time we had done this.
Yeah.
Is there some other way you'd like that?
No, I thought that was perfect. Was everyone good with that?
Works for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Might need to borrow. Oh, I do have a pen. Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of November 30th, which we just got recently. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read them, but that is the meeting that we had on the SAFER grant.
Nice.
I'd move approval. I read it.
I found them very thorough myself.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? 1 abstention. Okay, moving right along. Just so you all know, Carol Mitchell had a conflict this evening with zoning
Board, right.
where she was doing the minutes and it would still switch to a Wednesday. So she will be doing the minutes, but she'll be using the DVD from the filming, which is one of the reasons that we are filming tonight. So,
Now, this was her inaugural meeting of the zoning board of appeals, so.
you know, and I forgot to say my little thing about is anyone audio or video taping? We have no one from the press, so
Wait a minute, how about cell phones?
no, they're supposed to be
Supposed to
hidden.
tell everybody to shut them off.
That policy hasn't been adopted
Yeah.
yet.
Oh, good.
A little bit. We've gotten 4 or 5 comments back, but it went to the school building committee at their last meeting, which was the week we were going to adopt. So I'm letting it go another week and a half, so folks can have.
Oh, good, so I can make my
Oh,
comments.
so I can whip out my cell phone now?
Let's start texting.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is discussion on finance committee roles and responsibilities. And I had passed out, well, dispersed some of the documents. I'm really interested. We had an email from Chairman, Board of Selectmen Chairman Mealy about proposed process for this year and some other documents back in November. And we mentioned them when we did the year-end review, but we didn't really get into it. And the process we've done in the last couple of years is to have joint meetings with the Board of Selectmen. I think he's looking at a different process. So I was just kind of interested in comments from the Finance Committee about what you think about our roles and responsibilities. How should we do it? Last year, there was the Finance Project Working Group. I'm not sure that that's going to continue. I think it did some really valuable work, and so are there some aspects of that the Finance Committee should be looking at? Or, you know, just what do people think about all this? So I'm just going to open it up to discussion. I don't-
Madam Chairman, if
Yes.
the committee has no further need of my services this evening, I'm going to ask to be excused.
It's fine.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to have a discussion, and you can get the minute, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you needed me for your discussions, I'd be more than happy to stay, but it looks like it's kind of a insular meeting relative to your,
I'm sure that you could give us some input in terms of some things, but we're not going to really make any
okay.
major decisions.
If there's any questions that come up.
You would like the evening off,
I really would.
and you may have it. You want to wait till I sign these?
Yes.
I'll try to sign them and
I
talk
would.
at the same time. Let someone else talk. Okay, does anyone have anything they'd like to sort of start with?
I didn't have a problem with the selectmen being part of our meetings. That could be independent. I don't think that anybody in the committee felt that we were unduly influenced by their presence. You know, sometimes it even helps you to maybe think of something else, but if we want to do our own meetings, the other finance committee I was on back in the Stone Ages, we did act independently, and the role, I think, of finance committees has changed since the late 80s and early 90s, but, you know, I think sometimes it made it maybe a little bit more efficient and kind of get them to do something rather than 2 separate meetings. So, I mean, if the question was whether there was an objection to having the selectmen present, I would say no. I know we're going to talk about budget liaisons, and that's something I do think would be very helpful for the committee, where individual members or member of the committee meets directly with the department head and kind of drills down more into the budget than just having he or she come in and do a quick presentation, and then they can kind of even maybe lead the discussion or, weigh in as things go along. And then it's kind of like we have some subject matter experts on a particular department, and it's probably a little bit more casual doing it with the department head at his or her location, and kind of a dialogue back and forth. So that would be my only comment. But as far as the process itself, I don't think any strong feelings either way.
Okay, George?
Just maybe, Tom, before you leave, you ushered in the change from the double meetings, if you will. In other words, the department head would meet with the finance committee and then meet with the selectmen independently. And they were merged, I guess this last year. Has it been 1 year or two?
No, it's been
Oh, no,
John Ford.
John, right, I was gonna say, this was
like
an
3 or 4
institute.
years.
Oh, it's been more than that.
It was actually something that Steve Mealy and I came up with. So it's been,
John was
quite a
on the
while.
board, was chairman at the time.
Yeah.
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 And it came out of the issue that we were having as a finance committee was discussions with the department heads. If they were in advance of the discussion the department head had with the Board of Selectmen, and different information came out, we didn't have any recourse, really, to go interview that department head. And conversely, if the Board of Selectmen talked to the department head ahead of us, and issues came up in our meeting, it was hard for the Board of Selectmen. And we found ourselves repeatedly, okay, well, what are they gonna do? Well, what are they gonna do? And the thought was, if we had one conversation with critical departments, and it ultimately ended up being with all the department heads, that having that one conversation allowed us to hear at least some concerns and viewpoints from both perspectives. It, in theory at least, it was going to leave us with either more time or better time for our deliberation after we had heard. So that was kind of the genesis of the joint meetings, and it was well, let's see if it works and makes better use of everybody's time, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, for those reasons, yeah, I was agreed, I all for a unified message rather than, there could be an event, or maybe it's, instead of a Monday and Tuesday, it could be a Monday and then the following Tuesday, and a lot can happen during the budget season. So there could be a different set of facts that are being, heard by the selectmen versus the finance committee. But, I was always, I on the heels of what John said about the having the liaison that we used to have a long time ago, I think that would be a real good idea. I know the selectmen are talking about their liaisons, and I don't know if they're all squared away.
I think last evening they kind of
Reshuffled some things
reshuffled,
around.
refined the original tasking that they were looking at. So I think that they are complete at this point. I'm not going to speak for the board. That came out from the board. I found the joint sessions to be helpful. It certainly is, from a staff time perspective, it's also helpful that they're not out a couple of nights, but that's minor in the scope of things.
I've been thinking about something, though, and I kind of am racking my brain. When we changed from the town meetings that used to be the third Monday in May, they used to be later in May, and the election was earlier. And then we switched it around so that the town meeting is earlier and the election is later. I'm not sure that we ever adjusted our budget process to reflect that change. Because one of the things that I think has been happening is that in the budget process, we're almost to like the end of the time, and we're still talking about budgets, and we're still trying to make decisions. If the process were moved up a little bit, so we jointly sort of like went through budgets together, but had several meetings where the finance committee could deliberate as a finance committee, I think it might be a little bit different. I think we're going through these budgets and we're getting to a meeting and we have to just like run through everything.
Yeah, that's
Seems
what
that
the
way.
point I was making is that, Tom comes out with his message, or the budget message, where you have the budget assumptions and, pretty much, what we're looking for, our forecast for the upcoming fiscal year that, you know, of the budget that we're gonna be discussing. And, you know, it's a good message, but it also, because of the process where we are visiting with the department heads one at a time, and it's pretty much a bare bones budget, right, Tom? I think that's your
Annual statement.
yeah, that's right. It goes from year to year, and it's kind of insipid almost, that we're not dealing with anything new. And it's pretty much a blend of a level services and a level funded budget, kind of. I mean, there's certain contracts that have to be increased. And everything else is pretty much level funded. And it's, that being said, it doesn't really have us probe, you know, it kind of lets you sit back and says, okay, well, I guess everything is going according to plan. If it's bare bones, everybody's going to be happy. And does it really prompt you to look further into the budget, especially if we haven't spent any time as liaisons in these particular departments? In other words, it sounds good, and it's easy, but it's almost too easy. I would rather be able to probe, but I would rather make sure that we have the commitment of the people
Right.
to be able to make the time to at least meet with the department head one time independently to get this information. Just, you know, find out, you know, do you have a lot of people who are retiring or something that's an outlier that does not happen every year that may have been overlooked?
When I first came to Bourne back in '05, there were budgetary finance committee liaisons to a number of departments. There was an ISWIM folks who were people that were involved in finance. There was some of that. I don't know if it got as detailed as someone tasked to, you know, the Conservation Commission and those types of things, but at least some of the larger departments there were liaisons from the finance committee. And I think that helped. One of the things I might suggest before you get into your deliberations, and then I am going to leave, is we used to meet the first couple of years. We would spend a Saturday down in the underbelly of the town hall, and as I recall, it was a joint meeting, and it was an all-day affair.
It was before I was on the committee, so
Okay.
it would have been, were you?
This was '05. I came in February of '05.
So it was
February
probably
17th
before
of
that town
05.
meeting, because I was appointed to the finance committee after that May town meeting. So that would have
Oh,
been
may have been the
before I
one
was
year
there.
then.
You would have been there,
Yeah, but
George.
if it was a daytime meeting,
It was a Saturday
Saturday.
meeting.
Saturday, yeah, I don't remember ever,
Or maybe it was just the selectmen.
Yeah, I don't remember attending
Okay.
it either.
yeah.
That may be something that if you are meeting in separate session, if that's the way it ends up going, it may be where there are queries on specific departmental issues. Be it ISWIM, be it DPW, you know, I don't think there's a lot coming out of Conservation or Board of Health and those types of things, that you could meet in a joint session or two. And it could be on a weeknight, but I was thinking you could dive into it on a particular Saturday and just get it done, as long as it's that type of thing. I don't know what the Board of Selectmen would think of that. I haven't discussed it with them. And the other thing that I would ask is when you do set up your liaisons and you set up your meetings for your liaisons, just CC me on that so I know when those are happening. I probably won't be there, but it'd just be nice to know when they're happening, so.
I will just say that when I was on the other side of the fence, when I was on the school committee and I was dealing with the finance committee, there was a subgroup of the finance committee, and we had posted meetings where they would meet with the budget subcommittee of the school committee, and we had maybe two or 3 hour meetings before the budget went to the finance committee, and it was a very detailed, thorough. They asked a lot of really good questions, but we were able to explain what was going on and the reasons, and we were able to work out and come to solutions for things. And the other thing that we did differently was before the annual town meeting, the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee would have a joint meeting, one joint meeting, where they talked about where there were differences on the budget. You know, if they said, well, we think we should do this, and the Finance Committee said, we think we should do this, when they went to town meeting, it was, the Board of Selectmen recommends this, and the Finance Committee recommends this. But it was clear to the people, and it could be decided. And I've had a couple people comment to me that the way we do this big budget, omnibus budget, and say yes or no, that sometimes it's hard to get all the information to people so that they really understand, so.
Well, I had trouble with that. Last year was my first year, MJ. And I had trouble, we're going along reviewing each and every department's budget. If we see a line item that kind of looks kind of funny, it's way under budgeted or whatever the story is, I would have thought we would correct it on the spot. But then the way you did it was at the very end, we had one vote on the whole budget. And I had trouble with that, and I still theoretically have trouble with that we couldn't fix things as we went along, department by department.
The Finance Committee cannot change the budget line items. They can recommend, but you can't
But
change
see,
the budget
that's
line
what,
items.
that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at, and that, what happened through that process, where the Finance Committee recommendation was one thing and the Board of Selectmen recommendation was another thing, generally, there was a discussion at that meeting, and there was work to consensus. There was very few times that they actually went without a consensus but it was a much more
Yeah, I would think you'd get
detailed.
together and agree.
And I
on
actually
that.
think one of the things that's happened, and a couple of Finance Committee people have mentioned this over the last couple of years, is we'll go through this whole budget process, and then at the end, there'll be these cuts that are made, that are, these are the cuts that the Board of Selectmen has kind of made, and it kind of comes at the end of the process, so.
Well, we had that this past year when we had
Yes.
that April.
Yes,
cut.
so, I
It's
mean, there's a
moving
lot of
target,
things, but
I understand that, but I just felt a little powerless. If we saw something that doesn't look right, yeah, we can write it down and hold it until our April meeting, I guess, and there were a few issues.
Judy?
I just think, one of the reasons why it's difficult is that it's a meeting of 17 people. It's the 5 selectmen and the 12 members of the board, or members of the Finance Committee. I find that a very difficult situation in which to articulate, and I noticed as we went through these joint meetings that hardly ever did any Finance Committee meeting people speak. Maybe a few. You always spoke. Maybe John, but a few, but not many, and not many discussions went on between Finance Committee members, which I think is a very valuable thing. We're the people. We get to decide whether what the selectmen did is good for the people. So we have a different role. We're not all together. We're supposed to be the critic. And to be the critic, I think it's easier to be in your own group when you start to analyze, is this good for the people? We don't have to be financial geniuses. We just have to, from our own point of view, say, do you think this is a good thing for the people of Bourne? That is our role. Their role is to create a budget. And they're also looking out for the people of Bourne. But we're the check on that. Is it really a good thing for the people of Bourne? That's why I think I like the separate meetings better. And I also remember when I was on the Finance Committee, it seemed like in the dark ages now, when we always had separate meetings. One of the things I loved was we would get assigned these liaison things, and we would come back and people would report from their own point of view what they saw in that committee, what they liked and what they didn't like. And we always had a huge understanding of what was going on. So far, I don't have really a good grasp on what's going on, because I sit at these big meetings. A lot's going on in these meetings, but not much is really involving me. So it's difficult for me at the end to understand what went on, but you sort of let it go because nobody else seems to mind. But if you're by yourselves, if we're together, I think we would tend more to question things, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. So that's why I like the joint meetings. And I loved the Finance Committee when I was on it. I was on it for 6 years, before you and during you, I think. And then I did the stint with the selectmen, and I didn't like it that much. And then I came back, and then I stayed out, and it was hard for me. And I like this role much better. And I think it's a great role. And people really love the fact that there is a finance committee that you can go to and that can talk in terms that other people in the community can actually understand. And I think that's our value. So I'm thrilled if we're going to have a few meetings on our own. There are people in this committee, I've never heard them speak in the time that I've been on since, and I don't know how long I've been on.
Well, we've had a couple meetings now where people have spoken.
Okay, now we
We've
had
had a
the
couple
two, maybe two.
non-joint meetings.
Yeah, the couple of meetings that I really liked were the last one we had. I thought it was fabulous on
That was a good
the
meeting.
firemen, and we had one on, a short one on the override. You know, I don't think we gave the override its real due in this committee. I think we did, doing that in the joint committee also, I thought was difficult for me. It was difficult for me to say things that I really wanted to question in a large group. So that's all, that's my opinion, and I don't care if you tear it apart or not. I don't really.
George?
Yeah, just on the heels of what you said, that November 30th meeting it was a focused meeting.
On the
and
SAFER
it was,
grant.
The SAFER grant, which kind of prompted everybody to explore the fire department a lot more deeply than we normally do during the budget process, especially.
Right.
So
I love that.
it was great. Jeff, you missed a good meeting, but it was basically this is the kind of your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But it also forced us into, we're dealing with the SAFER grant, so you really had to drill into the staffing issues and the overtime and ambulance revenue, things like that you normally wouldn't do. And it was just one department, and it kind of was leading to one particular meeting one day. It wasn't like meeting after meeting after meeting. So that was kind of an ideal situation, and like it or not, we have to deal with a budget where we have to look at each department, week after week after week, and it's a lot of work. But this was kind of an ideal situation. But if you can just remember what happened during that meeting, there was a lot of institutional knowledge that was gained during that one
Right.
meeting, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I know I began to understand much better how the fire department worked and how much more they, for instance, is ambulance service rather than fires. Nobody mentioned the word fire except in firemen. So they didn't worry about that because I guess there aren't that many fires anymore, and there's tons of ambulance needs. And I liked the way he talked about the fact that we have this huge town and so many different places are critical for the firemen to be there if they're needed, the canal and the roads that go through and everything. So it just was very valuable. I love that meeting. It was a great meeting.
Anybody else? You can,
Thank you.
okay.
I leave you with one thought, though.
Okay.
As you look at liaisons, it sometimes is very helpful if you go to an area that isn't your comfort spot.
I agree with that.
Good point.
So something that you may not be as attuned to as something else. And you stick with that for a couple of years, and then you move to something different.
I think it is good to switch them around.
Yes,
and,
I think, because in the end, you learned everything.
I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the night off.
He's leaving
Welcome.
before you
I'll
change
give you a
it.
call, Tom, and kind of if we come to any conclusions, just so we can talk about it. One of the things that, when I was looking at the Bourne Finance Handbook, which definitely needs to be updated, and I would really like a couple people on this committee to kind of sit down together and go through it and come up with some revisions, so we update it and we make sure
Mary
that,
Jane, do we need it? The handbook, now, I think that was done before we had a charter or before we had,
I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's smaller than the 174-page Association of Town Finance Committee
Okay.
documents.
Okay.
It has wording from the charter in it and wording from the bylaw in it. It talks about process a little bit. it talks about, one of the things that was interesting, financial reviews, reviewing the annual financial results with the Director of Finance at the end of each year, along with the Board of Selectmen reviews the town's audited financial results with the independent auditors at the conclusion of the annual audit each year. And I think last year we got the report, but I don't think we had an audit meeting.
I don't remember that we did.
I don't think we discussed it much.
And I think we got the report from the audit. Everyone got the report? Did everyone get the audit report?
It was one of our
Yeah.
first meetings, if I remember right.
It was passed out, but I don't think we had the auditor come in and speak to us last year.
Oh, no.
No, we did
Didn't?
not.
I don't think we
That would be
barely
neat.
discussed that report.
And so I definitely think we should have the auditor come in.
Yeah, I thought we,
I
yeah.
would have
I thought it was a
remembered because
joint meeting
Third
with the Board of
Yeah,
Selectmen.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think, I think it's been 2 years since we did it.
You sure? 'Cause
No.
No, it never happened since I've been on.
I'm sure we never discussed it last year, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
I'm
you have
the
people that
accountant
were
all my
not-
life, I would have
Yeah.
remembered.
All the new people say, I never heard of this.
Never saw,
Never met the guy.
never saw the auditor.
Well, I just look at the findings, and I don't remember, I think there were, the year before, I think there was like one really innocuous finding, you know, I think the finance department was supposed to put together a manual, you know, like an accounting manual on, you know, what to do if somebody was not able to come in, you know, and that's
Yeah.
certainly needed, but that was the only, what I would call substantive finding in that whole audit report, and I think there was one since then that had a few other minor
Yeah, they
findings, so I
talked about
thought we
money
did
put
have one.
aside for pensions and that sort of stuff was discussed.
Yeah, OPEB,
And I don't know if
that's-
that was 2 years ago. or
Yeah.
not.
I think it was 2 years
Was
ago,
it?
because I think then last year we had the woman come and explain OPEB. The woman that does the actuarial
Yeah.
stuff came to a joint meeting, and we
Yeah.
had that discussion, and that came out of the finance project working group.
Yep.
So I don't think, I think we got the report, but I
They
don't
must
think
have
the
just done it with
auditor
the
came.
selectmen, because they must have to come and do every year to the, to the
I-
selectmen, I would think.
I don't know.
Mark Twain that once said, it's a sign of age when you can vividly remember something that never happened. And I-
But it's because
I-
I've been to
yeah.
a number of them myself, but I just, I
Yeah, I
don't.
thought we've seen that, Melanson and Heath used to be the auditor, and I think we've seen this, I mean, Tom would be here,
Right.
be able to answer that. I think he's done the audit, at least 3 years.
Chris
And I
is the
could-
guy that does.
Yeah,
it.
that's right, Chris was,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'll follow up on that to see.
It's
if-
Clifton and Larson.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. it's-
The other thing it says is
I don't know
Really
if
reviews,
they're
thorough, he
with
gives a
me,
good
but I do.
report, too. I
reviews ISOM financial reports on a quarterly basis. That's kind of interesting, because I don't know when was the last time we really
It's been,
did that.
No, it's been,
That's
And we
pretty-
used to have,
That's
as you-
pretty detailed.
We used to have, as you said, that ISWIM group, and the ISWIM group, the people that were assigned to ISWIM would go and meet on a regular basis and delve into it. And I don't know if anyone.
last time I did it was with you. There had
I
like
did
3
ice
of
swim
us, I
once.
think.
But I mean, you rotate, so I did ice swim once, I remember
Right,
that.
right. And
I did
I think
public
Hal was still
works.
on the committee,
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
were downstairs in the basement of Town Hall.
And then we also did one over at Icewood. I remember
Yes,
doing one there.
yes, and they talked about, that's, out of that committee, out of that subcommittee came the profit center discussion. So they started putting their things into profit centers to see how they worked. And recycling was one that was showing a loss all the time, but they had put the residential recycling center into recycling as opposed to its own service to the community, so that kind of changed things.
This is how the finance committee members get educated, to me.
Yes.
That's what I think is what happens.
And they had the cash versus billing and,
Look at that, see,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
you know.
And then the ISOM working group kind of started, and then
Yeah,
that
I don't
became
think, I don't think we've
more
done
the.
as much on the, on the
George?
budget as more, as than looking at more opportunities for the landfill itself, like Harvest Power, for example, and that. And then we were involved with the ash contract with Covanta. You know, we got the numbers on that, but I think really we've been more focused on, some other projects that we've got coming along than with, really looking at the books. I mean, we only have one residential customer now with Falmouth, and then whatever they get the C and D, we had some discussion on the C and D, and then he came in with us because he needed to transfer because he had more C and D coming in than they'd budgeted and that, but never have done anything to the extent of what we did back
when
a
we
few
did
years
the
ago.
budgeting kind of thing. Did you have something? George?
Yeah, just a couple of things. You're talking about education and, like a continuing education program for us. When I was a working stiff, it was very difficult for me to attend any daytime meeting. And I can empathize with anybody who has works off Cape or just works away from the town of Bourne, trying to make it to a meeting. But I did spend one meeting with the bond council several years ago when I was first on the committee, and that was very rewarding. And I don't know if we could ever get them in to address us, but that would be a real gathering of knowledge about, how important the bond rating is and what the town has to do. And you can see the way the finance director has to, field questions from the, from bond council and, see what they recommend, and it's pretty interesting. But they also, at one time, we had the tax assessor, Donna Baracus,
Yeah,
I
she
think her
came
name
one
is.
time.
Yeah, she came to one meeting, and if we could fully prepare for her, there's a lot of things that she can enlighten us on, and I think we certainly became aware of that during the that 2.5 override initiative back during the summertime, because a lot of people were asking, well, what's the basis of this average tax burden increase that we're going to have, and what's it based on? And we were, I know you got engaged in a lot of Facebook discussions with people about our tax rate, and Bourne does not have the lowest tax rate by any means on the Cape. However, we have very close to the lowest taxes
Average tax bill.
to average tax bill on the
Yes.
Cape. And it's a kind of a confusing issue. It's very difficult to get that concept across to the regular citizens. But I think certainly the Finance Committee should have a very, a good foundation with that, because it's kind of confusing. It does have a lot to do with the property values, and good example, there's it's actually not happening in town, but it's the wind turbines that are happening right on the border. And there was a lot of people addressing the selectmen last night about their possible decline in property values. And I don't know how many people that would affect. Could be a couple hundred homes, but what would that do to the other
Overall,
members of, the community, the people who live far enough that they would never see that? They could be impacted, even though they say, well, it's not in my neighborhood, I don't care. Well,
If those property
you gotta
values
start
go,
caring.
if
And
those
it's-
property values go down, your tax bill's gonna go up.
That's right, because we have to, it doesn't mean we're thus we're gonna lower services because a certain area of town has a lower assessment. That's the only way that can happen. So if you're gonna maintain the services, sorry, the people who have their solid assessment they're gonna have to pony up a little bit and make up the difference. It's not gonna be a lot of money, but it would get people's attention. But anyway, it would be good for her to, to address us. And I think she did address us, but I don't think we had a lot of questions ready for her. That's the point I would make, and
Right.
it's incumbent on us to be fully prepared for these meetings, because we can get a heck of a lot more out of it than if you just, come in and says, okay, this is the tax assessor, and see what she has to say, because I think she would be willing to answer any questions that we pose of her, especially any probing things, but they have to be things that you've thought about.
I've thought about that, and one of the, I agree with you that it would be good to have her come in. And the other thing that we haven't looked at, which I have found in recent years to be pretty important, is the tax recap. We don't take the tax recap, which sets the tax rate, but see what happened. What was the new growth? How did our local receipts that we estimated, how did they, what were they estimated? How did they come out, the actuals? And there's a lot of information in there and how we estimate our local receipts.
Well, that's true, because you've got 2 or 3 lines for real estate tax income. You've got last year's plus the increase, then you've got, wait a minute, you've got last year's plus 2.5%, then you've got another figure for.
And you've got new growth.
No growth.
New growth, I just want to make sure new growth should be in there,
Right.
because I wasn't positive it was.
We need a new chair too.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Or just breaking
Whatever it is, he's breaking stuff over there.
yeah, I'll take care of it
I
later.
hope you don't fall out.
And in this Finance Committee handbook, it says that the Finance Committee or a working group will prepare a report, for example, land bank programs, which is now CPA.
Yeah,
Marina operations, health insurance, and health insurance is a really big topic, and it's really something that I think we need to get more versed in terms of the options and how the decisions are made, and why are we staying where we are, and have we looked at different ways, and are there different
Wasn't there a
things to
committee
do?
at one time, not to interrupt you, but I think there was a committee on that, because I said something to Steve Mealy about it, because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts offers insurance programs.
GIC.
Yeah, and their rates from, I'll go back to the town of Linfield, because that's what covered the town employees, was so competitive that they actually cut checks to the employees because for their percentage that they contributed to the insurance, as well as the town savings. So if you put money in, you should get something back, and that's what the thought process was. But overall, the insurance has been much less, and then for retirees as well. So I said something to Steve about it, and I think he thought that it might not be a bad idea maybe to rekindle that committee. You know,
There is
something
a
like-
health insurance
It's
group
kind of been
that
dormant,
has-
I think, hasn't it?
Well, and I think it's got employees on it or representatives of the
Yeah, they
unions.
did.
I don't know about the finance committee, but there is a lot of, during the override discussion, someone came to me who's versed in this about consumer-driven healthcare, which is the new way of doing things with more like high deductible plans and, lower cost of insurance. But then you give incentives to the consumers to do things that produce wellness so that it saves money for everyone. And so there's a lot going on out there, and the issue of all the reporting and the new things that are coming onto the town, and how are they going to handle that, where the GIC becomes more. So we have been told that our rates for the GIC have not been, the census doesn't get us good rates, but that's a easy, they can just say that.
yeah. That would be worth exploring.
Yeah. Well, the whole shared cost, because I've found in the last couple of years that we say shared cost for the schools is 60%. But the schools have had some question about that. How does it get figured? Is that what it is? How do we know that? And we've gotten into the habit of saying, well, we don't charge you for shared costs. But then when you start talking about the school budget, they'll say, well, Upper Cape, it includes the shared cost. Well, maybe we should know what maybe we should know what the shared costs are and all the costs that are associated with the school, so we really have an accurate picture. Especially since the way the assessments go now with charter school assessments and school choice assessments and incoming school choice, the way the state aid comes into the town, I think we got maybe $150,000 more state aid this year, but I think the schools got more direct to them and the town got less direct to them, and so that impacts the whole budget. And we did when on the finance project working group, we delved into this cherry sheet a lot and how the cherry sheet works. So there are some big topics.
Cherry sheet is important, and we haven't discussed that here in a while. I mean, we can discuss that too in the FinCom.
Right. So you have the health insurance law, local comprehensive plan review, boy.
Oh, boy, that's not for us. That's a committee
Well,
on its own.
and I think it hasn't been done in a long time, but long-term financial projections, school construction programs, tax assessments and fees charged, and benchmark analysis for other towns' operations. And I think some of these are things that the finance project working group started to delve into, which is, Judy, you said, well, maybe the finance committee
Right,
should
I
be doing
agree.
more of this work, not just the finance project working group. I think the finance project working group was good for communication and consensus building with getting information across through different boards.
Especially for the school group. They were
Yes.
really, really impacted by having all that information, I think, that they had never really had before.
And I've thought about, Judy, when you were on the bylaw committee and they changed the way the capital project the capital outlay committee was put together to try to encourage more of the long-term thinking and getting into more bigger ideas, which the capital project outlay committee has done a lot of. We started doing tasks, long-term, you know, the police station and the school building and long-term plan. We started looking at bigger topics, which sometimes help you analyze.
Yeah,
What's-
right now we have, you know, the problem of, is it gonna be the police station, is it gonna be people school, is it, you know, what are we gonna do here? It's gonna be a big, capital discussion, I would think, right? Who's on the capital anyway? I don't even know, do we?
Jay and me.
John and I are from the finance committee. John O'Brien is a member. Rick Mastria is a member, and we have a vacant position since Bill Ware passed away
Wow,
last spring.
so there's 5 members?
So there's 5 members.
2 of them are FinCom members and
Yes.
3 are at large? Is that what it
Yes.
is?
Yeah.
So, and we meet Wednesday mornings.
That's good.
In our new
Looking
DPW conference room.
Yes. So, so I'd like to maybe sort of bring this together. I think, and actually, I think Dick had suggested that we should go back and look at the Finance Committee handbook and maybe update it, some of the things, like it's not 15 members anymore, that's just a charter.
Right.
And I think that's like a little subcommittee to kind of go and do that and come back to the committee with a draft, I think would be a good idea.
Of the, what is it that we're,
Looking at the Finance Committee handbook,
okay,
because I think that when we did the Finance Project Working Group, we came up with some benchmarks for timeline, and I think it's important to have some of that in the committee's handbook, so you can really understand. So, that's one thing.
Well, I remember skipping through the pages you emailed me. There was one place that said the finance committee members have the authority to go question virtually any employee in the town, or they could go through
Well, the books of the town are open to the Finance Committee, and so that's a departments, you know, to go. I
It
mean,
may
we
have
can't-
just said treasury
well, I don't think it
department.
actually says you can just
Go
go and start questioning someone who's an employee.
No, because we've had some
You have to-
problems with that
Yeah, you
in
have
the
to go through
emails.
channels. for
There's
that.
gotta be a, yeah,
Yeah,
you've gotta
it's
go
not
through
appropriate
channels.
for us to
But,
just
you can.
scurrying around.
No, we
I
don't.
think that,
You're right, Judy.
I think the books, the departments are open to the town, which means if we have a question, or if we have liaisons, and there's a question for the department, that we should ask the question of the department and copy the town administrator so that he knows, and then can get the information. Generally, I've
You're
found.
absolutely right.
And if we're, one of the things we did for questions before is if we were having a department come in, if people had questions, if they got all the questions to the chair, and then that were dispersed out. That way, if 4 people had the same question, they weren't getting 4 different emails asking the same question. It was going kind of through the chair, through the town administrator, to the department head, and then kind of coming back. And I think that's,
Yeah, there was I think that was your initiative, Michelle, might have been, that was a great idea, but the trouble is with that is the timing. You'd have the Monday night meeting, which sometimes goes till 9 or 10
Yeah.
o'clock at night, and then
Yep.
the deadline for really getting the question for the next week's meeting would really be like on Wednesday
Yeah,
to
got-
you, because you
gotta
would
give
have
the
to
department head
call
time
them
to
and forward,
prepare.
and then they'd have to prepare it, and then they'd probably end up preparing it on the weekend or Monday
Yeah.
morning, and I think, I don't know, how was the response as far as, you know, given we had between 12 and 15 members at the time? light, or,
Light.
yeah. And then I mean, we could do better. I mean, that's our failing, you know, is that we didn't make more time to do that. But that's the way to go, is stop this duplication of work, or, you know, try to force yourself to think of a question during, you know, a meeting when you're looking at the budget for the first time.
And some of it comes out after I would say most of it comes out after. That what will happen is you'll have the meeting, you'll meet with the department head,
Yeah.
you'll get the information, you'll think about it, and a question will come afterwards.
Right.
And then you need to get the question answered afterwards as a follow-up, and that's probably more of the, so I guess, are there topics, for me, the long-term projection is a big topic. I think revenue is a big topic, because we constantly talk about expenses and what's the expenses of the budget, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about the revenues. And understanding the cherry sheet, and understanding the taxes, and understanding the local receipts, and different funds, the waterways fund, the ambulance fund, the general fund, where do we get our money from? You know, I think those are important topics for the, looking at the entire budget. And I think some of those, before we get the budget, if we're not getting the budget from the Board of Selectmen until
February 2nd, is it?
February 1st or something?
Yeah, on or
February
about,
1st,
yeah.
and I think they're trying, what they're gonna try to do is have, the town administrator is going to present the budget message and the budget, and the Board of Selectmen is going to take a couple weeks to review that budget before transferring it to the Finance Committee as a budget.
Right.
Is going back to that step, which is actually a step in the charter, that the town administrator presents the budget to the Board of Selectmen, they review it and have input, and then they send it to the Finance Committee. Will, I think, help them have their chance to present the Board of Selectmen's budget to the Finance Committee, and then I think that's a change that I think is probably a pretty good change. But it might give us some opportunity in January to have some of these larger topics as meeting topics in preparation for, while they're deliberating on the budget that they're gonna send us, we can take what's information in the budget message and review some of the long-term projections and the sources and uses and the revenues, and have some meetings that address those issues. Does that make sense to people?
I do have a question. If we're not getting the budget until after the selectmen review it, how much time is that going to give us to review? Is that
Well,
that gonna
for one thing,
strain?
you can watch them on TV and get some sense of what's going on, right? If they're reviewing the budget. So you will be it won't be like, oh, gosh. You'll sort
Yeah,
of
I would
know.
say that's good. I would think that either we'll have, some members of Finance Committee should be there when they're doing their budget. And I don't know how they're gonna do that, whether they're gonna bring in that period of time department heads in,
Yeah, they
so that
probably
it's
will.
before it goes, so that's when they have their department head discussions. I don't know. So I'll think about, and if anybody has particular topics that they'd like to have covered in that sort of January point of view, I think we'd be a little bit constrained, but one of the questions is the meeting schedule.
I was gonna ask that before we left. Are we gonna be Mondays or Wednesdays, or do you know yet?
All right, so here's what's going on. I've had several conversations with Jen McGrail, who's the manager of the Bourne Community TV, and they are working on setting up the library at Bourne High School to be a live broadcast room, which would allow us, once it is set up there, to meet on Monday nights at the Bourne High School library and have live videotaping. The problem is, until that's set up, we would either not be broadcast if we met on Monday Night Live, or we could do Wednesdays until that happens. And I don't know if Wednesdays is okay with everyone, but
Do you have a timeline on when the
she's,
library will be set up?
I'm gonna say by she said at the latest mid-February. So I think by the time we're doing the budget, because now there's a special town meeting February 8th, Monday, February 8th.
Yeah.
So, even if we get the budget on February 1st,
We're not gonna be doing a lot of stuff leading into a town meeting.
and so I was thinking though that, if in February, if we did Wednesdays in February, then we wouldn't lose that President's President's Day Monday.
You're
That would
right.
that would give us an extra Monday.
Yeah, we lost that, didn't
Maybe 15th?
we? I just need to know.
Yeah, it's Monday, the 15th is the holiday,
Yeah.
yeah.
You work
Um,
You've been doing to do that.
But you have your Mondays, because you did Mondays as your date, as your day, right?
Well, I can keep it the same as last year, but I can change it either way. But I do work a couple evenings a week during tax season, which is
Coming right up.
mid-February to mid-April.
Right. I think by
And that's
that,
when you guys come
I
back.
think by that time, we'll be back to Mondays, with the exception of the 15th.
Right now, I'm planning on having Mondays off.
Okay.
If there's a mix-up, well, just let me know.
So Monday, the 8th is a special town meeting, so we will have to have some meetings in January to, there's not gonna be a lot of warrant articles, but, to review those warrant articles. They have to,
So essentially what you've got is the month of March to have meetings with department heads, have those reviews so that we've got enough time in April to have any discussion, particularly with any last minute changes, before we have to have our information complete for the handbook for May 2nd. Like, really, you've only got the first week
Right,
and
so-
a half of April.
one of the things in the charter is that, our finance committee report and all that has to be in the handbook.
Yep.
So a lot of times we have things where we haven't decided on. So, yeah, it's,
We make these deadlines and then we actually go through it and we realize 21 days before the scheduled date of the town meeting can be a real problem. Because I think that's what it says here.
right.
Copies of the report available in the town hall. That's 3 weeks before the scheduled date of town meeting. Usually is difficult. We never make it, I don't think.
With all our recommendations.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually end up having a report, but it doesn't
Right.
necessarily have all our recommendations in it because we haven't made our recommendations. Usually we have some, but not all.
So Monday, the 11th is 21 days ahead of time, so we probably have to have our recommendations in by the 7th or 8th of April. You don't have them in so that they could be put into the warrant because the warrant has to be available.
But what is that? Is that the finance committee's report?
This is the finance committee's report.
But the warrant is a little bit different.
Yeah.
The warrant is later.
My thought of it on this 21 days is nobody's really interested in it 3 weeks ahead of time of town meeting, so it seems like it's a little bit of
What's the, what's the warrant one? Do we know?
I don't know.
Now, the charter one here says there's a date fixed by bylaw. They have no date there that it's supposed to be, but it's section 7-4. That's when the selectman is supposed to hand the budget over to the finance committee.
Yep.
So the bylaw is supposed to
Charter.
contain more of the detail, and the charter was just supposed to be the
By a
overall.
date fixed by law, what's that date?
So this is kind of bumping into the next agenda item, which is the charter review questions. And I don't know if we want to talk about any of these dates as part of the charter review. We might not be ready to talk about it tonight, but I think that so 21 days before the town meeting, the Finance Committee report should be available to voters. April 15th, the voter handbook goes to the printer. It's about then, because 15 days prior to the annual town meeting, the voter handbook shall be available to the public not less than 15 days prior to the annual town meeting. So, it may make sense that the charter have that date be in sync, that the Finance Committee report and the handbook be together as 15 days.
I think that would be helpful. If we put these dates in and we're never able to make them, I think we should then consider some time changing.
Right. I think too that, the bylaw date for the transferring the budget to the Board of Selectmen is January 15th.
Yeah.
And then February 1st, I think that's actually a bylaw date.
I don't have all of that information.
Okay.
MJ, I just wanted to wheel back just to our process one more time.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful if Tom, I'd like the format of the budget, the way it's handed to us, and that they give us a pretty good snapshot of information. You know, TAs and town administrators' budget, the year-to-date activity. In other words, it's usually, by the time we get it, usually is maybe July 1st through the end of January.
Right.
She may have paid bills for January, for
Right.
December, so it's about a half year's worth of work. So you can get a pretty good snapshot of how they are doing compared to budget and compared to last year. And that's reasonably good, and I think almost all of the departments are represented in the budget handbook that we're handed, except for the schools. And it's the schools basically that have really nothing. And they give an excellent presentation when they're called, but it's mainly statistical. It's a set of metrics. They're very useful because it really gives us a snapshot of how they're doing and the challenges that they're encountering, how students are doing on the standardized tests, and things like that. But it would be helpful if we had a little bit of the townside departments giving us more of that information. Maybe a concise mission statement at the very beginning of their presentation. Now, I don't think it's part of the budget package. I don't think they could actually put it into the budget handbook, but maybe we could ask the town administrator, and I could send you a little memo to this, like a list of line items that we could get for our own edification while we're reviewing the budget. But basically, we could see, what are these departments trying to do this particular year? Is it do they have a rollover a year after year after year? Their mission statement never changes, or in fiscal 17 are they going to have a very special mission statement, something that a special initiative that they're going to have to do, that they're implementing something new? I think that would be very helpful in looking at their budget, even if I were a FinCom member that's not a liaison member, if that's the way we're going to go to another department. In other words, this would enhance my learning, I think.
Oh, we
see how
should,
they're doing.
we should ask them if they have key performance indicators. If you have KPIs,
Yeah.
a set of metrics that you measure your performance against, that would be beneficial. That was one of the questions that, one of the people, when you asked, did I get many questions? Glenn Galusha was great at department by department coming up with, okay, these are the things I want to know. And he asked the same questions year over year. I think the conversation we never had was, are these the metrics you use to measure your performance? And either the answer is yes, they are, no, they aren't, or we don't have any. So in the instance where we don't have any, do we use this as a launching point for understanding how do we measure your performance? And are we using the dollars appropriately? In the instance where they do have KPIs or some kind of indicator, do you use the same one year over year? Can you provide us any historic data? You know, give us the last 3 years. Much beyond that is probably not terribly useful. But the budget over the last 3 years has been relatively consistent. So how have you performed against that? And so if it's the number of FTEs you have, or it's the number of licenses issued or inspections done, or whatever it is, there's some things that you probably measure that we should understand, because some of that volume will be beneficial in understanding, well, does your budget cover what you're doing?
Yeah.
If 3 years ago you were doing 100 and today you're doing 50, well, that's different than if today you're doing 150. But if the dollars haven't changed, how do we get deeper into understanding?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because I think, it almost sounds like we're becoming Budinskis, we're trying to micromanage them, but basically, you just want a fuller understanding.
We
And I
just want
think it'd be,
information.
that's
We want
right, I think
information.
it'd be helpful to them.
Yeah, I'm not arguing, did you do well or poorly against your
We're not
your
judging.
KPI. I just want to know what it is. And if you have a baseline, just tell me what your baseline is.
Yeah.
And if you have an objective you're trying to hit, tell me what the objective is. And if you made it, great, what did you do that allowed you to make it? And if you didn't make it, great, what did you do that stopped you from
Right.
That would be
making
something
it?
you would give them ahead of time, so that they wouldn't be blindsided when they came in.
Well, I
That's what I
actually
would
think it's something we might want to have George develop.
Right, exactly.
That we could give to every department
Yeah,
in advance of, this is a piece of information. These are questions that we want to have answered about your department. And John, you weren't on capital before we had it, but we have now on capital, every request comes where there's a series of questions that they answer. What are the, how long has this been in the department? What is it replacing? What are you doing with the old equipment? What challenges have you had in terms of maintenance? Is it going to save any money? Do you need to get approval from any other department? So over those capital questions, every time, in our book, those questions are answered, and it gives you a framework for talking about things. And I think that kind of framework would be helpful for us for analyzing the departments. When the first reductions came in the override discussion at the Finance Project Working Group, every department had done cuts, and they were completely different.
All over the place.
And it was really hard to get a handle on, what are the services you're doing? What is going to be eliminated? How much? One of the big questions I've been asked over and over again about certain things that have been reduced in the budget is, what would it cost for us to keep this? What would it, what is the cost for keeping this service? Is there a way to do it? And not just a cost way, but is there a way to structure things so that we can
No,
do
even more importantly, what does it cost by not having it? Not having the money. I think that just personally, when we looked at a new DPW facility, And I go back to that because that's one thing that we really drill down to as far as the services that the DPW provides the town. And probably, and I said this during meetings, and I'll say it again, and they perform more services for the Bourne residents than almost any other DPW. We'd visit a DPW and they'd say, you guys do that? You guys do, wow, that's incredible. And, so if they don't do it, then maybe you end up doing it somewhere else and paying more money for it. Like if you have to bring a fire truck to the dealer versus having the mechanic fix the fire truck, it's going to cost you a lot more money. And everybody's going to say, well, you got to keep the fire truck running, but you could have kept it running for a lot less money if you had the mechanic to do the repairs. And, and picking up the trash versus having I know that that's not a good example because of ISWIM, but instead of having a private contractor do it, what does that cost? And that stays within the budget. So, and I think that maybe doing the liaison thing, going back to that, is that, maybe all of a sudden, 2 or 3 people or whatever the number is that happens to work with the department head will get a better appreciation of what they do, kind of like the questions, like the SAFER grant. I mean, everybody left here knowing exactly what they have voted on. That there was no doubts, and looking at all that stuff spurred questions that might not have been asked, but, I think we all really knew what we were doing at the end of that night.
We also knew how the fire department worked, too.
Yeah, right.
I thought it was fascinating.
Right. And I think the department heads would love to have you do it.
I know.
Yeah.
And
love
we had
that.
a lot of prep, that was the thing, we had the time to look at it, it was an off time of year.
Right.
We had 93 pages of emails, and we really studied the thing.
They were also came well prepared, I thought, and they did a very good job.
I think the other area that we've started to bring a little more structure to how the information comes to us is the CPA requests. We've pushed to ask, who gave you the estimate? What kind of estimate did you get? What's the work that's going to be done? It's more detail than we were getting. It probably could, like a lot of things, could be better, but we're, much as we did with capital, the process that we had when I first came on the finance committee was abysmal compared to what we do now. So, we reserve the right to get better and get smarter as we go along. And so some of this same kind of structure needs to continue to be applied to more and more of what we're doing. And I think the department heads are accustomed to thinking about some of those operating measures that they need to share with us. So now it's time for us to take it to the next level and ask, we've asked you the things that we're interested in, but really, are these the things that you use to measure your performance?
Well, what do you think we should know that we haven't asked? I
Well,
think that's
yeah.
a pretty good question, because you often don't know
Right,
all the good questions.
right.
So they'll tell you what's important. That's good. This has been a good meeting.
Do you you said, George, you might start working on something?
Yeah, I would forward something to you, or we don't want to do a open meeting law violation, but I mean, if you just send ideas, and what I had in mind was, I guess we would go through town administrator, for this to get his,
Well, I think we should draft
departments.
something.
Yeah,
I think that we when you're trying to do something like this, you have to have a draft to talk about. If you get a draft to talk about, and it comes to the committee, if people have ideas of questions, they could send them to you, and then you could come up with a draft, and then we could look at it, and it's gonna be a process, but if we could say, these are the questions the finance committee, and so it's not like every week we're trying to come up with new questions based on that department. It's more like, these are the questions that we're gonna plan on asking to have an understanding, and the people, if we set liaisons, can also use that as a framework. I think having a framework helps keep the discussion focused.
And even though we may end up with something that has a laundry list of questions, if they don't all apply to a department, that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to
Can understand.
start to understand that, or that there's a refinement to it, or that, town administrator may come back to us and say, absolutely, something we should be able to provide you, and we can't. And here's why we can't. Okay, well, how do we get there? And is that something that has to be cared for in the budget to get there. Or if we don't spend the money, we'll never know that.
The one thing is that the department heads have started working on the priority-based budgeting. And so I don't know how much is gonna come out of that, so I don't think we wanna ask too much, you don't wanna do
Right.
too complex. But I think if we can come up with a couple basic questions, even last year when they started providing us with the FTE information, it was all in different formats and different ways, and there was no way to bring it together cohesively. So they actually put Mike Ellis on the task, and so there is a big spreadsheet now. But even that is kind of hard to deal with because it's very big, and it's hard. So coming up with some way to, you know, how many people did you have how many people did you have 2 years ago? Because when we had that September meeting where they started talking, well, I used to have 5 people, or I used to have that secretary, or I used to have this, but now I don't have that. And it helps you have an understanding of what the impacts on the budget have been and how they're getting along, so.
And I think there's a difference between knowing that you have 2 FTEs, but one of them is shared amongst 2 departments or 3 departments. I'm not sure that I necessarily at the high level care that they're shared. Yes, at some level I need to care that they are shared, but as you're trying to articulate what's the total FTE, all of these ifs, ands, or buts around who's shared here, half-time, quarter time, every other Monday, or whatever it might be. I get you need that for your scheduling and you need it for your budgeting, but when I ask you how many FTEs you have, it nets out to 1 point something, whatever that something is.
How will the priority-based budgeting affect how we interview people? What will be, do we know yet? Or?
I think it's too preliminary this year.
Okay.
I think they're just starting to work through it.
Do we need a
so-
lesson on it, or is it going to be pretty instinctive? I don't know.
I don't know. One of the things that we had asked for was the process. And when we first asked for it, they hadn't really finalized the contract yet, so that it wasn't part of, but it is, I do have it as a future topic.
Oh, good, that's a good topic.
The priorities-based budget process and update, and I'd like to have that as,
Yep.
and the visual budget, which is, I don't know if all of you have looked at the visual budget on the Arlington website. It's a way of visualizing the entire budget, and you can delve into things. This was a recommendation of the Financial Project Working Group that they've been working on. They're very close to having that up and running on the website. And they had some rounding things that they had to work on, so they thought it was gonna be up this week, but by the end of the year, it should be ready, and it'll be very interesting.
Who is doing that?
Well, Linda Marcelli is working with the visual budget people.
Okay, I never heard of visual budgeting. This is news.
Go to the Arlington
website is
website.
incredible.
It's really something.
And you can
Yeah, we
see it,
saw the
and it's
program.
really cool, because you can put in, well, I pay $6,000 in taxes, and they'll tell you, well, you pay so much for education, and so much for police, and so much for fire, and you can delve into it to see what the cost, what are the costs associated with, and what percent of the budget is. It really takes the town budget and makes it visual,
Okay.
so that you can get an easier understanding of it. And it answers a lot of questions, a lot of common questions that people have. So it'll be really good, I think, once we get it up and running. So,
I think for this effort that you're gonna start, George, at a minimum, I think we need to know total number of FTEs. And I think we need to know the transactions. It's, if I'm in a department that issues licenses for something, well, how many of those are you doing? Some of those volume metrics will help us understand. I know it doesn't apply to all of the departments, but there's some, like how many building permits did we issue? Because that translates into work and people that need to do the work, as well as support tools to do the work.
Oh, you're right. Some of these departments issue hundreds in the summer and nothing in the winter.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they,
And, but.
And the
but-
fire department has to do inspections.
Right, Right.
Real estate transactions.
And a lot of this information, it's kind of interesting, a lot of this information is in the
It's
town
in the town
report.
report, yeah.
Report.
So it is information that they put together, and but it's not information that we generally sort of look at, and I think it's important I think you're right, I think it's an important metric.
And having it in a consolidated fashion so that we can look at all the departments.
I think having a form
Together.
where we put where they fill in, you know, so that it's gonna come in a way that we understand will be helpful.
And first pass is just, give us the gross numbers, perhaps, make it easy, before we start trying to dive into seasonality, or whatever the variables are that affect what you do.
Like, DNR, like, how much gas did you pump at the marinas, and by the time the end of September is over, that's it. It's
Yeah.
July, August, September, maybe a little bit in June. But that's it for the whole budget year, so that whole revenue, all that activity takes place for the first 2.5 months of the fiscal year.
It's like recreation and the lifeguards.
Right, yeah, things like that.
Beach permits and shell fishing permits. They probably all, I may sell 500 of them, but do I sell 300 of them in 1 month?
Right, which is probably, and what does that person do? Unless
Yeah.
it's a seasonal employee, what do they do during the other 8-9 months?
You know the statement, if you build it, they will come. I was looking at planning and economic development. We're talking about wastewater. And you're reading about things in the paper, and they're saying, well, we can't do this because we can't handle the wastewater from that facility. And you look at how much money could be involved in a business and what it could mean to Buzzards Bay, and yet you can't do it because you can't handle their wastewater. Now, I know we're moving along on that particular project, but, that might be spending $10 to get back 50, presumably, I think the experts have to come in and say, well, this is what would happen if we could do this, but right now, we just can't.
Well, interestingly enough,
Close.
we are getting close.
We're getting close
because,
to the 1,000 gallons.
and I'm not sure that,
10,000? I forget. What-
It's
but-
been discussed at the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Sewer Commissioners meetings, but the wastewater advisory committee has been working on the project at Queen Sewell
Queen Sewell
Park.
Park, no, I
So
know.
that whole leaching thing is done, but the Cape Cod Commission has mitigation funds that it gets from projects that are done in Bourne. And there was money sitting in these mitigation funds that they've tapped into to do the engineering for the packaged treatment plant that would provide 100,000 gallons, is it? 100,000 gallons per day. And use that leaching field, and that leaching, the part that they're gonna use is what empties into the canal, not into Buttermilk Bay. So that's moving, and it's moving quite quickly, and I
Yeah,
think.
2 or 3 years. I think, it takes a long time, longer than you think. They just don't come and dump it in there. But also, they're gonna provide room for a second one, just in case our big project falls through. You see, that's the problem. The big 10-year project with Wareham, and
Right.
that's a fabulous project as well. But that depends on Plymouth and Wareham, as well as our contribution. This one is just ours, so it's a I love being on that committee. The people are absolutely, it's just a great committee. Wes Ewell is so knowledgeable, and he's really done most of it in term, and I think we're gonna have it. I think we're gonna get this, and we have some people already lining up, to do some projects.
Good, because then you got the possibility of the T. So that,
Well,
I'm not sure
I
that's,
don't know, it's getting shakier and shakier. That
Well,
one.
actually, the
Well,
T is very interesting, because when
Operator.
you compare the project, Green Line project, which is all new track, land takings, it's a hugely capital-intensive project, to the T here, where our tracks are done. They've got a platform that if they do the waiver so that they use the existing platform as opposed to building a different platform, there isn't there isn't a lot of cost involved in doing it because the infrastructure is there. And so that's a big difference between the Green Line, which is hugely controversial and difficult and, you know, whatever.
So there are three big projects that have come to light and gone through and talked to the planning board, I believe, for Buzzards Bay for that. So, if it ever, from the moment I came into town, we've been talking about developing Buzzards Bay and cleaning it up. And I think we're getting to that point where it's actually going to happen. I find it so unbelievable.
They have two
exciting.
projects that the Board of Sewer Commissioners have granted wastewater to. They have one that's in line. I mean, they're in line. There isn't
Yep.
enough capacity now, but if someone else backs out, they're like next in line. So there's a lot going on, and I think that's gonna be good and helpful to us. If we can increase some of our revenues.
That's right, exactly.
Then that really helps us a lot.
It'd be interesting to know, like, with Keystone, how much, what we benefited, how we benefited tax-wise from that, and things of that nature, I think. Something Finance Committee people should know.
Okay, well, I'm gonna suggest that in the month of January, we plan on meeting on Wednesdays instead of Mondays. I believe the school committee is going to meet the first Wednesday in January. So that would leave us,
It's Friday is January 1st.
yeah, so that's the 6th. So in January, we would have the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th as potential meeting dates.
20th and 27th, okay.
And then as soon as we hear from Bourne Community TV that high school library is up and running, we'll just switch to Mondays and meet there. And the other Wednesday would be the Wednesday, the 3rd of February, which would be before the special town meeting. So I don't know if we'll need all those dates. If we can have that, if we can work on this checklist thing of information at one of those dates, if we can talk a little bit, the finance handbook might take a little bit more time than that, but I would like, I'd like to have a meeting maybe where we talk about the information that we'd like to have included. I'm gonna start to take some notes on some of the things that George was saying, but when we get information from the town administrator, not only the budget with the year-to-date activity, but the sources and uses and the long-term plan and the FTEs and the free cash analysis. I think all those are things that I'd like to have up front. I'd also like to have a meeting in January if we can with the tax, some of those revenue questions. The tax recap, the cherry sheet, the tax, maybe have Donna come in and talk about taxes and maybe have long-term plans. So not too long a meetings, so we don't do it all and too much, but maybe some of those topics discussed along with whatever we have to do for the special town meeting. And then we can hit the ground kind of running when it comes to the budget in February.
And if the weather will kindly cooperate. If you remember
Yes.
what the difficulty we had in scheduling that February
Yes.
town meeting last year. But
Yes.
it's got to be easier this year.
So
Can't be like this 2 years
February
in a
town
row.
meeting is specifically for the changing of the ice swim thing,
Well,
isn't
there's-
that what it is?
Right, that's the main thing is.
The main reason why?
I think there's
Changing to
three
single
particular
stream?
thing. There's the single stream question, there's budget adjustments to FY16, which I think there are going to be some recommended changes. And there also may be a warrant article relative to the additional land for ice swim. I don't know if that's gonna happen or not, but, so I don't know what else there is. The private petition closing is December 28th, and the warrant closing is January 19th. So it's a special town meeting, so it's pretty close, so. We won't know until January 19th what all the things are. If anyone has any topics. In terms of the liaisons, I don't have the final list of liaisons from the Board of Selectmen yet. but if people have something that they're interested in and would like to work on as a liaison, one of the ways that we may do it is have the Board of Selectmen liaison and the Finance Committee liaison meet with the department heads together. So then you have two different people sort of hearing the same thing and, you know, going back then to both committees. And having two people from the Finance Committee can sometimes be a challenge because it's, you know, with the open meeting law, having one person is okay, but having two, but so when you have them from two different committees, kind of makes it better, I think.
Yeah, that was the biggest challenge we had, why some of these committees died off, was the open meeting challenge. Till they made some recent changes, it was so restrictive that we just couldn't do it.
And if we find that there, I don't know if people think that a more in-depth review of any budget where you had multiple people doing it would be beneficial, but maybe we just start with the one person and one FinCom, one selectman, and then see how that goes. And kind of evolve it. I do hope that we have some discussions towards, in this process that would allow us to coordinate with the Board of Selectmen, maybe more towards the end of the process when we get to the real decision-making afterwards.
Yeah, but two finance committee people wouldn't create an open meeting issue, right?
Well, you know,
That's not a quorum.
it's not a quorum, but there was some sort of question when they
Yeah.
had the no open meeting law, where they became very sticky about
Yep.
more than one person meeting outside of a meeting and talking about things on an issue that's going to be before the committee. I mean, we can go to have coffee and talk about whatever, you know.
I never
Baseball.
quite understood that.
And I'm not
It
sure
didn't
it's
make sense
really
to me.
true.
Maybe we should
I
check
mean,
with
it didn't
Barry
make
and
sense.
find
That
out.
sounds like jury
You want me to do that?
Sure.
I'll ask him, because I
Get
think.
a clarification, because
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
they
really,
are,
there is-
I know that Don Picard and Jerry Ellis are working on public safety for the Board of Selectmen. So they are gonna be two of them. So if it's okay for two people, then I'm more than happy to have two people do it
Two
together.
people
I
is
think
just
it's,
more interesting. 'cause
It
there's
is.
two
That
different
is
points of
almost
view.
so
Yes.
subject to interpretation, though. You almost have
Yeah.
to give somebody like, if Barry is that knowledgeable, just tell them, this is the scenario
Well,
we
he'll
envision.
probably give me the guy to talk to
Yeah, I
in the
know.
Ethics Commission.
We
yeah,
should
but
have
that's
done it.
okay. I mean, I think we'd like to have an answer up front about it.
Yeah.
And I sent out a list that was like some different things. I tried to group things as like human services or culture and recreation to kind of get, you know, in a group idea. And so maybe just let me know if you have any ideas of things that you'd like to do, and we'll do that at our next, we'll kind of review it and assign it at our next meeting. And if you have any big topics that you think we should be discussing as a committee, I'll set those up for the January meeting. Anything else on this?
I will not be here for most of February. Just looking at my calendar, I'm gone on vacation from the 2nd through the 12th. And then the week of the 22nd, I get to go to Wisconsin for a week.
Oh, wow. February.
Good,
Yeah.
beautiful this time of year.
February in
Absolutely
Wisconsin.
stunning, can't wait. And it's so much fun, I get to repeat it the week of March 7th.
Oh,
You are
man.
so lucky.
I am. Went out there for training. So I will miss a lot of the fun and frivolity here.
You will.
Yeah, but you can watch our meetings live streamed. Sling TV.
Well, you're having a Chardonnay, huh?
Hour difference, though. Remember
That's
that.
right, 1 hour time difference.
I tried watching it on the tapes of it.
Well, so that meeting of the week of the 15th is very important because you could be here if we met on that Wednesday.
That Wednesday I can be
Right.
here. That's, I think, the 1 week in February I know for sure I can make it.
Okay, and so I'll know more about that as that
Okay.
goes. Charter review, does anybody have anything in particular that they feel is, I mean, other than we talked a little bit about the dates?
I think we have to go through it and then see whether we think the charter is right or wrong. We haven't actually lived it yet. The 21 days seems like a a tough.
I agree that it's something that we stretch and don't really have our recommendations
We never
for, and
do
so
it. We
therefore, and I also think we should seriously think about moving some of these dates up, since we've moved the town meeting. I don't think we change them once we move the town meeting.
That's a good point.
I think that it was always February 1st, and we used to have another 3 weeks.
Did they move the town meeting up this week?
Well, it's happened years ago. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
quite a number
It
of
was
years.
at least 5 years ago, because the recommendation was to sequence town meeting ahead of the town election, so that the Board of Selectmen, who were responsible for developing the budget, were responsible at town meeting to present it.
That would be
What we
good.
had occurring was the board who was at town meeting was not necessarily the board who put the budget together, because the election came ahead of town meeting. So we reversed that. But that was really the only change that was made.
I think I was on the board then.
Yeah. So if you
Either,
say
you were either on the
Throw
board
the
or you
bums out, you can only
were
throw
on the bylaw
one
committee.
bum, or maybe
Yeah,
two
you
of
were,
them
you were
out.
on the finance
Many
committee
different-
when we
Already
did
ran
that.
two of them out.
I think it was
One of the
It
towns
was
a
really
couple of years, I
interesting,
think it was
and it
Salem,
is
they
important,
voted
I
out
think, that
the
they defend their own budgets.
superintendent, and then the committee changed
The
at
end.
the last minute, and they changed.
Oh, yeah, that was a mess, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I like the timing in terms of when the town meeting is and when the election is. And I think it's good for a number of reasons. If you have to have an override or a debt exclusion, you've got it built right in to the timing where you can do it. But in terms of moving the process up, I think some things might need to just be kind of shifted a little bit to get a little bit more time.
It just
for-
feels like that we're getting more and more pressure. We have to wait for the budget on the front end.
Yeah.
So that pushes us back to February something, and then we've got to get it done by the middle of April, because we've got to be so many days before town meeting. It doesn't give us a lot of time.
Well,
It would have been nice if we could have started it next month, you know.
Well, I also thinking having an independent meeting, a meeting independent of the selectmen might be a luxury we can't afford this year, because it's so intense, from, with a February town meeting, that means nothing's really gonna happen till the middle of February.
And I'm thinking that it may have, I gotta go back and look at some history, but it may have been that shifting in the timeline that we ended up having those joint meetings.
Yeah,
That might have kind of come about the same, time, that we lost 3 weeks of review, and so trying to have department heads go
probably
into
was,
both.
probably was.
But
Was.
from the standpoint of the charter doesn't dictate any of those dates other than the election and the town meeting. It just says that prior to the town meeting at a time fixed by bylaw. So what we're really looking at is bylaw recommendations
For that adjustment of the timeline.
for adjustments of timing.
Let's push the town meeting back.
You have a hard time pushing town meeting back much farther,
Run into Memorial Day.
right? And
We
we've
can
got to
do-
have
we've
enough
done this.
time.
We've done this under separate meetings before.
I think
This
January is
this has
more of
been
a key,
done.
if we could do that sooner than later. I agree, I think that's, it's like a fire drill sometimes, and, if you have a little bit
It
more
sounded
time,
more
if we
like
could,
we're getting pushed.
yeah.
Getting back to that information you have on the first 6 months of the fiscal year when we get the budget, they really I don't think they can really produce that, December's actuals until probably sometime late in January.
Oh, well,
Could be
that's
another
true,
one.
George.
So then they have to pay those checks so that the activity appears, and then they print out the budget sheets.
Well, one of the things I think that might make a difference is really if the Board of Selectmen does more of their budget review prior to giving us the budget. If they talk to some department heads and they do some of that review as in January and prior to giving us the budget, then, Peter, did you?
That's the goal, is to so when we give it to you, it's your budget.
No,
So that way our work's already done.
yeah, but it's always your budget. We're gonna criticize
Well,
it.
You're trying to
it
eat up
is the
budget.
selectmen's budget when you give it to
Yeah,
us. It's
that's
not the
right.
town administrator's budget, it's the
Ours
selectmen's
to
budget.
work on.
Yeah, ours to work on.
We're gonna
yeah.
tell you whether it's a good budget or not.
Well, you are, checks and balances.
That's
and
exactly
check.
right.
Yeah.
MJ, were you in the finance committee in Southborough?
No, I was on the school committee.
When did they start the budget process there, when you were there?
We had December, the school committee started our
Yeah.
preliminary budget stuff was in December, and we continually worked on the budget through the process. It really, we didn't have this process. There was a preliminary budget that was presented, which was then worked through during the process. And so then at the end, there was like I said, the meetings where the school committee voted their final budget in March. We had our public hearing, voted our final budget in March. And then after that, there were the joint meetings where we sort of arrived by consensus on a final budget. Now, their town meeting was in April.
Yeah.
It was an April town meeting, so,
We had it in April, but we started budgets in Linfield in November and December. And it, spent more time on each of them. I agree with Brian. I think that if we could at least back it up even a month, it would make it a lot
Either
easier.
extend it on one end or the other. It doesn't
I
matter.
know what you're talking about, the 6-month actuals and that.
but I think
but,
you're right. I think, and this was very confusing when we were doing this budget timeline. There was a charter which had dates in it. And then this last charter referred to the bylaw. And so I think it's really important that we talk about the bylaw,
Because the
that
bylaw
bylaw
is easier to
dates.
change than the charter.
Yes, and I think that's why they referred it to the bylaw, so it wouldn't be a big difference, even though we really did try to do capital earlier this year, and it was very difficult. I mean, maybe because it was a difficult year with all things going on, but it was very difficult to try to move that into the fall. It didn't happen as I had hoped.
So if I remember, when I was on the finance committee, we would do 2 or 3 budgets in a meeting. For an hour and a half, say, or something. That's how you have to do it. So you invite them.
One of the things that I'm not sure is clarified enough in the charter is the policy role of the Board of Selectmen. In terms of, it says that the Board of Selectmen is supposed to set the goals, and they're supposed to do it by a certain time. The budget priorities, I think setting those budget priorities could be better clarified in the charter so that their policy role is what they want the budget to do, giving direction to the town administrator on how he's gonna do that. I think that could be clarified more in the charter. Some of the other questions that they're looking at in the charter is they're considering change. There's been a proposal to change the town administrator's contract from an indefinite contract to a timed contract. I don't think a lot of people really understand how it's working. And then I think there's some discussion about residency requirements, which they addressed in the last time, and I thought they did it pretty well the last time. So, when it comes to the actual review, we'll get what they're suggesting and may be able to give more feedback, but
So they have to come before us as well, right?
yes, because they will report to this town meeting, so we need to leave time for that. And it sounds to me where we were thinking about going to they were asking if there was any input from the finance committee, and I'm not seeing too much on anything that we feel really needs to change, but if you think about it and come up with anything else,
I'll take a look.
let's try to have that as another future really try to read through the charter and think about recent history and see if there's anything
I was
we
on
think
the
we could
last charter
clarify.
committee,
Yes.
5 years ago or something?
Yeah, 5 years ago.
And I was on the one 5 years before that.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys should have, I'll figure it out then.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Nope.
I think we're good. So I guess our next meeting would be January 13th,
Okay, I won't be at that one.
okay?
Be on vacation.
You can come here on vacation.
I'll be in Belize.
13th.
Belize,
That'll be tough.
Belize,
not
did you
Wisconsin.
say? What do we, don't we have some kind of telecommunication we can use?
Yeah, we can do a
Face-
remote
FaceTime or
meeting.
something?
Right.
Can we do FaceTime with you?
And I'll see what I can put together with the town administrator for discussion around the long-term projections or the tax revenue and some of the revenue issues. Maybe we can have a sort of a global meeting on that, at that meeting. Does that sound like a good?
Okay, let's,
Say again?
For that meeting, just January 13th meeting, to have some of the topics of the larger topics that we discussed
Yeah.
being revenue, long-term projection, and, what else we said, but, it's good, okay, we've got our meetings, we're gonna do Wednesdays probably until we get back to Mondays, and, is there any other public comment? Mr. Mulvey?
Speaking as an individual, the Charter Commission has met 5 or 6 times. Several of the selectmen have been in, some more than once, town administrator, et cetera, department heads. As this develops, the Charter Committee is attempting to take each article of the charter and review it among themselves. But as the guests come in, more and more of the discussion and the suggestions to subtract or add significant portions of the charter involve those articles of the Finance Committee, budget development, presentation at town meeting. The timing, increasing or lowering time elements. And as I say, the charter, as far as the FinCom comes, says you shall. So you're really talking two different things. One, the charter says you shall, but now as you spoke tonight, much of it is how you take and react to how you shall by your internal process of who you talk to and bring in, whether it's, as you say, a review of the whole town financial, by an outside consultant, so on and so forth. But you're into two entirely different things. I would respectfully suggest that as this develops, it's getting so heavy, and those sections are probably the most wordy sections in the charter, that each member have a copy of the charter before them, and this committee takes those articles section by section, reads them, and develops their own concepts among yourselves of what would improve those sections of the charter. And even now, when the charter committee has met, 5, 6 times, Mrs. Conrod's been there outside. And,
I just have
but
one
more and
suggestion.
more, I see a large amount of focus on those portions of the budget. But it's going to require reading each one of those articles and subdivisions and understanding it, and then making, I would hope, your group, this is an individual now, would come in before the charter committee with those recommendations.
So we'll eventually see them anyway.
Well, I think he's talking about feedback from the finance committee. What is the finance committee's appointment? And we don't know what's being said at the charter review committee, so we don't know what's being suggested, so
Right,
we
but
have
they're
nothing to
gonna eventually
react
come
to.
in and tell us.
But
Yeah,
eventually.
but I think he's suggesting we be proactive in providing them with input as opposed to reacting.
So do we have suggestions? So let's, I'll put the charter on the agenda again for the 13th of January, and then we can really think seriously on if there's anything, think about how things have been going in the roles and what you think. One of the things that has concerned me is we have a huge amount of the budget that is controlled by contract. It's controlled by contracts. And So we go through the budget, and it's like, well, that's contractual, and that's contractual, and that's contractual, and that's contractual, but we don't know anything about the contracts, what the percentages is, how they work, how they impact the budget. And it's been raised to me by a number of people that the finance committee should be talking, when we talk about the budget, how the contracts impact the budget, because that's,
It's a huge part of our budget,
yes.
huge.
And do we have any control over the contracts?
We do not have any control
Right.
over the budget, of the contracts, we do not have any control over the budget. Town meeting has control over the contracts.
Yeah, all right.
Because, through the budget, so if the contracts, and I think it's important for town meeting to understand the impacts of the contracts. So, I'm not sure what our role is in that, but I think,
So it's mostly the salaries of people, is that what you're talking
so
about?
way back when, I think
Not
that
just
salaries
salary.
used to be in the, they
Salaries
used to
and
do the salary, the
benefits,
salary
Time
thing.
off,
Yeah.
things like that as well.
One thing, there's a trend that's occurred over the past few years, and I think it, there again, I think it came to light during the 2.5 initiative back during, the early part of this year. The private sector versus the public sector, as far as earnings, insurance, pension versus Social Security. And it's, the side of a healthy town is one that keeps everything pretty much in parity with one another. And I think it's come to a point where people in the public sector have a little bit of an advantage, especially coming off the heels of a recession. It was pretty serious. There's some inherent advantages of being part of a company that's, or an outfit that has negotiations done in their behalf.
And there are things that are subject to state law, and there are things that are, there's a,
Contract, yeah, that's right. These are, and I guess it's something that always has to be looked at, and this is something that would come to us when we're probing a department. Not that we can influence, but it's a question that should be asked. What contracts are negotiable in the near future, or what is there any bargaining? I don't want to go too far into this conversation,
even,
but
I'm gonna say it's contractual, what are the contractual impacts? What
Yeah.
are they?
and how does the town of Bourne compare with neighboring towns? In other words, are we underpaying people, which I think we were for a number of years, but I think we're close to parity now. I don't think we're overpaying anybody. I don't think, but that's should be researched.
So the way we could do it is to
To answer that for the moment, you're into now, who does the bargaining? Who ratifies the bargaining? And
Well,
this
we-
is all being discussed, as I say, more and more, this charter group is getting an awful lot of input where there's things that should be looked at. One of the things that came up, the definition or the difference between the capital expense budget versus what I call a capital plan, where one is money and the other is projection of paying for what has been approved over a period of years. And just changing that wording to clarify it. Who makes the first positive motion at a town meeting? Maybe it's worthy of discussion, but it's been brought up. That's the stuff that's coming up before this committee. It's getting very broad. That's why I say you're particular in the budget and the shall of the FinCom. You really had better start to look at the actual wording, paragraph by paragraph.
All right, we'll put that on again. I do know that the process is very different here than in Southborough. The wages, the salary administration plan was voted on by town meeting every year. This is the wages that are, in the contracts, and had all the, and they used to do that, I think, in Bourne, and then they stopped because, when the charter came in. I don't know why.
Never seen that done.
I don't know. They just
Contracts
said
were
that they,
always
the
kept.
salary administration plan is
But you
different.
can
That's really the
compare
hourly.
salaries and all the other things that result from the contracts. So you can know, our health insurance, is it a parity with other towns, or what else do we have that contracts do besides salary, like you just named a few?
Vacation.
Benefits,
Time off,
time off, that type of thing. You could take those things that result from the contract and compare them with other towns, but I don't think you can have anything to do with the contractual agreements.
No.
I mean, there's gotta be some,
Be aware
that's
of it.
between the town administrator and his employees, I believe.
But I mean, I get, you can be lulled into saying, okay, well, we're negotiate the usual 2% or 3% or 1%.
We
And that
could.
is usually good for a while, but
Yeah.
is it in parity with neighboring towns? Not
That's
that
the thing.
neighboring towns
Yeah.
rule everything, but you certainly don't want to be an outlier.
And how does it impact the long-term sustainability of the budget? I mean, that's
Right.
another, I'm gonna,
We should.
we're gonna
have to
finish.
end.
We'll talk about, I did ask a couple of months ago a question at a Board of Selectmen meeting, what was the role of Finance Committee in contracts to request to the town administrator and, the town council, and I haven't got an answer. So I'm not sure what
I don't think
what
we
the
have
role
any.
of the finance committee
What, in
is in terms
negotiations,
of
you mean?
presenting it. No,
Oh.
in terms of presenting it to town meeting, because town meeting is the approval of the contracts by the budget. That is the final approval of what's in the budget, what the contracts do in the budget, and so.
So like we can take offense at some of the, if we think things are too high and say something, but I don't think we can be part of contract negotiation.
I
Yeah.
don't think we are part of
No.
contract
But like you
negotiation.
said, the town
But what
meeting,
is
if the
the
town meeting
effect?
doesn't approve the budget,
What is the effect of the contract negotiation on the budget? And I think
Right.
that's important for us to have a handle on it, at least. Okay, thank you, Jim.
okay, let's,
All right, so could I have a motion to adjourn?
motion to
moved.
adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good meeting.